Good evening, and welcome to our Wednesday devotion on John chapters 2, 3, and 4. We are looking at these chapters that we might have a greater insight into the person of Jesus, his identity, the mission of Jesus, and his ministry, and then the ultimate outcome of those three things for us, and how he has come that we might have life, that we might have it more abundantly, and that we might use that life to commune with God, to worship and to glorify him, and then to take the gifts and the fruit that he has given to make our world a better place. And so we are taking our time going through these three chapters. One reason, because they are the three chapters that opened my mind most clearly to the mission, the identity, and the ministry of Christ, and then how we apply it in our lives. And so we return once again to the first sign that Jesus performed, and we find ourselves at a wedding in Cana of Galilee. John chapter 2, verse number 1. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no more wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to." Now there were 6 stone jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding between 20 and 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw out some and take it to the master of the feast." And so they took it. And when the master of the feast tasted it, when the master of the feast tasted it, the water now become wine, and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who drew the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, the poor wine. But you have saved the good wine unto now." And then verse number 11 is very important. This was the first of the signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and the disciples believed in him. The imagery here is very important for us to get. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the ministry of Jesus beginning and ending at a wedding. We talked about in Genesis chapter 1 that first and greatest blessing given to man for temporal blessings is marriage, where he will leave his father and mother and cleave into his wife, and the two will become one flesh. We have talked about how Jesus and then later on the writers of the epistles use marriage over and over again to describe, to illuminate the relationship that Jesus desires for himself, for God the Father, for God the Spirit to have with mankind. And then, of course, Jesus' ministry beginning at a wedding at Cana, and the final act of his ministry being at a wedding, the marriage supper of the Lamb, showing us just exactly what God desires, the type of relationship that he desires with man. And so this story is pregnant with that type of imagery. And as you enter this story and you see the first of his signs, he is at a wedding, that greatest, that most intimate of human relationships, and it's about to fall apart. It's a picture of man. That our relationships, no matter how tight, no matter how loving, no matter how intimate, are tenuous, to say the least. Without what Christ gives us, our relationships are never as deep, never as pure, never as wonderful as they ought to be. If anyone has been married for any amount of time and has always seen eye to eye and never taken a word that their wife or their husband or even their children or their parents have said in the wrong vein or in the wrong mode and reacted irresponsibly or rashly, they're an animal I don't know yet. In fact, the first event that we see outside of the Garden of Eden is fratricide, where one brother kills another. And so all human relationships are hanging together by a thread, and none of them are what they should be. Look at the abuse numbers in the world. Look at the divorce numbers in the world. Look at the broken relationships between man and woman and parent and child and brother and brother. We see this over and over again, and that imagery is depicted here in John chapter 2. He's at a wedding, but it's falling apart. But into this tragedy, Jesus has been invited. And because of the fact that he is there, tragedy will be turned to triumph. Panic will be turned to peace, and sorrow will be turned to joy. But as we stated in our previous devotion, for this to take place, a relational change must take place. You see that in woman. What does this have to do with me? Jesus is not being brusque. He's not dishonoring his mother. He is saying that I'm no longer taking my cues, my directions from you. You must now take your cues and your directions from me. From this point on, you are to do what I say. And to Mary's eternal credit, she gets it, right? She tells the servant, don't do what I say, do what he says. But why this event takes place at a wedding is because it reveals the desire of God. God longs for this most intimate type of relationship with us. And it is also a picture of great hope. Not only does God desire this relationship, not only if we are honest in looking at our relationships with other people and examining the relationships from Cain and Abel until now, that we have a problem that needs to be fixed. If we're honest, that's the conclusion that we will come to. There is the great promise in this chapter, in this story, in this first sign, that not only has a problem been identified, a solution has been provided. Change in the old relationship is coming about. The old relationship is changing, and a new one is beginning. And it will be far greater than any solution that we might come up with if God were taking our directions. What we must understand, what we must admit, what we must deny in ourselves and receive from God is the fact that the main problem is a spiritual one. And the main spiritual problem is our separation from God. And Jesus is saying right at the very beginning, be of good cheer. Have hope. The problem has been identified. In fact, it was identified from the very creation of the earth. and the solution is at hand, right? That the remedy for our separation from God is communion with God. And where before that was impossible, just like water being turned to wine, empty jars becoming a celebratory part of a feast, just like before these things were impossible, I have come to make them possible. Right? To take the spirit that is dead in man, to take the corruption from him, to make us alive and in communion with God, where we might be held up during our times of weakness, where we might be comforted during our times of sorrow or of tragedy, and have a promise that our lives might truly change, that our relationships might grow deeper and better and stronger, and that we might move into this world with true and lasting help to the problems that plague mankind. Even something as you know, in the grand scheme of things, one wedding going poorly. We now, with our relationship established with God, can make a difference. I wholeheartedly believe that John begins Jesus' ministry at a wedding to show just that. Relationships are messed up, but good news, the relationship is changing. The problem of separation is going to be replaced with the glorious wonder of communion with God. And we who are helpless will receive the help from God and then made helpers in this world. I pray that you see that. I pray that you submit to that. And I pray that you determine to draw closer to God and then to take what He has given to make our world a better place. Where there is no peace, to bring that peace. And where there is sorrow, to weep with them that weep. And if we can help, to move ourselves toward that help. I thank you for listening, and of course, if you need any problems, if you're out of food, if you need some help, if you need spiritual help, mental help, emotional help, physical help, don't hesitate to contact us at Wildwood Baptist Church in Englewood, Tennessee, or on our website, wildwoodbc.com. I thank you for listening, and I'll see you again Friday.